2021 season, week 17. Jets are up 4 with the ball late. This 3rd and 6 does not get converted. They pick up 4. It's 4th and 2. And Robert Saleh decides to run a 4th down play that gets stuffed. Was this the right decision? To find out, we just need to do some simple calculations after we estimate some probabilities. So, let's look into this. How can the Jets win if they run a 4th down play? There are two ways. They could pick up this 4th and 2. After that, it'll just be kneel downs. So that's it. Or they could fail on the 4th and 2 and then get a turnover on downs while they're up 4. So they would go back out on defense while they're up 4 points and end the game by forcing a turnover on downs. They can also win two ways if they send out the field goal team. One way would be to make the field goal. You'd be up 7, and then end the game with a turnover on downs while you're playing defense up 7. The other way would be to make the field goal, go up 7. Your defense can allow 7 specifically, D7, your defense allows 7, and then that would tie it, you win in overtime. Now you can miss the field goal and win, but the probability of a missed field goal from this close is such a small number that expression would be a number so close to 0, it's not really going to change the calculation. So I just didn't include it. So we need some probabilities. The top 4 are very easy. Overtime, I say 50-50. A short field goal, you can't quite say 100%, but you can get pretty close. So I'm willing to say 98%. A successful 4th and 2 conversion, calling that X because we're going to solve for that later and see how likely you need to be at picking it up. And we'll see, we're going to calculate a number. And if we think we're better than that number at picking up 4th and 2, you should go for it every time. If you think you're worse than that percentage at picking up 4th and 2, you should be kicking the field goal every time. So that's X. We're going to solve for that. And a failed 4th and 2 is 100% minus X because those two things have to add up to 100. So that leaves the bottom 3, which we have to estimate. Getting a turnover on downs while we're up 4, getting a turnover on downs while we're up 7, and allowing exactly 7. And one thing to note is that these two, a turnover on downs while you're up 4 and a turnover on downs while you're up 7, the difference in this situation isn't how many points the Bucs need, because either way, they need the end zone. It's that if you're up 7, that means you kicked a field goal and then you kicked off, probably a touchback, the Bucs will have to go 75 yards. If you need a turnover on downs while you're up 4, the Bucs, it's the situation that we had in this game. The Bucs got the 4th and 2 stop, and they're going to have to go 93 yards. So that's the difference. It has to do with yardage, not points. So let's look at this based on today, because analytics is one tool you should be using to make a decision. Historical things, what happened 3 months ago, how the Bucs defense played 3 months ago, isn't that relevant? How the Jets defense played months ago or last year, isn't that relevant? Let's look at today to estimate these numbers. So the Bucs had 8 drives in this game. 2 of them were 75-yard touchdown drives, both after touchbacks, exactly 75 yards. 2 were field goal drives. They picked up decent amounts of yards. They were not going 4 downs, though. So they were going 3 downs. They picked up a decent amount of yards and kicked field goals. And 4 went absolutely nowhere. So let's try to figure out what percent the Bucs would score exactly 7. So that would mean the instances where the Jets kicked the field goal, went up 7, then kicked a touchback, and the Bucs are on their own 25. So let's look at it this way. The Bucs had 2 drives of their 8 go 75 yards. So I would say the minimum number should be 2 out of 8 because they've already done that 2 out of 8 times. The maximum number should be 4 out of 8 because those 4 drives to the right went nowhere. So those, even if the Bucs had been going 4 downs, probably weren't going to go 75 yards. But these 2 field goal drives that went about 50, 60 yards, if the Bucs had been going 4 downs, those field goal drives might had become 75-yard drives. So it should be somewhere between 2 out of 8 and 4 out of 8 based on today's play. And I don't have anything better than, let's just say, in the middle, right in the middle, 3 out of 8. So if the Bucs' chances of going 75 yards is 3 out of 8, 37.5%, that means their chances from their own 25 of getting stopped is 100% minus that, 62.5%. So the probability of the Jets defense allowing exactly 7 points, 37.5%, the probability of the Jets defense forcing a turnover on downs while they're up 7 when the Bucs start 75 yards from the end zone is 62.5%. So there's one more thing we need to figure out now. And there are the arrows, which I talked faster than I was putting the arrows up, but there they are. One more thing we need to calculate is when the Bucs need to go 93 yards, what's the chances the Jets force a turnover on downs? Let's look at it this way. 2 of the Tampa Bay 8 drives went 75 yards. So some percent of those 2 drives had the potential of going 93. So if you're going 75, it's not that much more difficult to go 93. There are a few more yards you need to get. There are a few more plays. So it's not going to be the totality of those 2 drives. So I said 90%. Those 2 drives went 75 yards. If the Bucs had been going 4 downs and trying to go 93, probably 90% of the time they would have went the additional 18 yards. Those 4 drives on the right went absolutely nowhere. I'm not going to count those this time, just like last time. And those 2 field goal drives that went like 50, 60 yards, what are the chances if the Bucs were going 4 downs? Those drives could have went 93 yards. Not as likely, because they did get stopped earlier than the touchdown drives where they did not get stopped at all. So there's some percent of the time those medium length drives could have been extended to 93-yard drives if the Bucs were going 4 downs. So I said 50%. So we have 1.8 drives on this left column, and we have 1 drive from this middle column. So that's 2.8 drives out of 8 drives. So 2.8 divided by 8 is, I think, the chances the Bucs would go 93 yards. So 100% minus that, which is 65%, is the probability that the Jets defense would stop the Bucs when the Jets are up 4, which is when the Bucs are starting from their own 7-yard line. So now we have all the numbers and we can plug them in. So this is where we were in the beginning. We could plug in all the numbers we have. We get to here. The bottom is just numbers. The top is just in terms of X, which is the probability of a successful 2. And if we just want to clean this up a little, we get to here. The probability of winning if you run a 4th down play, 0.35x plus 0.65, and the probability of winning if you send out the field goal team, 0.79625. So how do we solve for x? We set these two equal to each other. We have one simple expression. X is the only variable. So first you just move over the 0.65. There we go. Then on the right side, you could subtract and get a number. Then on the left side, you could divide by 0.35. Now your left side is just x, your right side is just a number, and we find that quotient, and x equals 0.418. So that's 41.8%. So the Jets should be thinking, this is the break-even point, 41.8. If we think we're more likely than 41.8% to pick up this 4th and 2, we will win more often by running a 4th and 2 play. If we think we're less likely than 41.8% to pick up this 4th and 2, we should send out the field goal team. So this is actually pretty close. In other videos, it's been a lot different. You know, historically, 2-point conversion attempts, which this is the same amount of distance. It's a slightly different portion of the field, so it's not exactly the same. Historically, those are in the high 40s. I have no idea what this Jets team this season would be on 4th and 2 plays. My guess would be most people on the Jets coaching staff would say, yeah, we're more likely than 41.8%. That would be my guess also. I mean, I'm not a play caller for them, and I don't spend time at their practices or anything, but I would say that this is a little closer, and if you actually think it's, you know, exactly 41.8, that means it doesn't matter what you do. Send out the field goal team or run a 4th down play. Both paths will result in a win the exact same amount of the time. But I don't have a problem with what the Jets did. I would say it's slightly or a little bit more than 41.8, and this was the right decision. So the Jets got stuffed and then ended up losing, so people are going to complain and say this was a terrible decision just because it didn't work. But the mark of a good decision isn't the fact that it works every single time. Steph Curry doesn't hit a 3 every time he shoots one. Mike Trout doesn't get on base every time he goes up to bat. The right decision isn't right just because it works every time. This was the right decision to run the 4th and 2.